Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools, and much more.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sean McCarthy, Director of Action Sustainability Community Interest Company, and it's my pleasure to reintroduce David Baggs from Australia. Welcome, David.
Hi, Sean. Good to be with you again.
So we spoke, I guess it must be a couple of years ago, and it ended up as quite a long podcast. I think we ended up putting it into 3 episodes because we were reminiscing about Olympics and all sorts of things that we have in common. But today, really, I'd like to just have a catch up with you to see what's going on in your life and to see particularly what's going on with Global Green Tag, which I think there's been some quite exciting developments since we last spoke. So what's going on in at your end of the spectrum?
Yeah, as you say, Sean, it has been a busy period. We launched our new Nature Positive certification for products and have got the first few products through the certification process. So they've been very exciting. We have a couple of new licensees now of Vietnam and Singapore and an emerging one in Turkey and Europe and Middle East, North Africa. We've launched a franchising process where we're just going through the process of documenting a franchise agreement so we can actually potentially have franchisees run global green tag based systems in different territories, and with us doing the quality control and the certification still in head office. We've spent the last 18 months and an inordinate amount of time and money developing an end-to-end automation system, process automation and licensee portal and client data entry and project management portal and certificate generation. And so we've really done a lot of work to kind of get ready to take the business to the next level and scale it up to meet the demand that we see coming down the pipeline.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I'm interested in a couple of things, but let's talk about the franchise model, because I'd have to say that we tried a franchise arrangement for our supply chain sustainability school, and particularly in Australia, as it happens, and it's failed. The organisation running it became insolvent. We've actually taken that over, and we're going to run it ourselves now. We're going to set up a business in Australia, employ some people, and run it ourselves. So it hasn't been a great success for us, but it sounds like that you put a lot more thought and a lot more investment to how you would actually franchise a business. I think we were very naive when we did it a few years ago and it didn't work for us. So would you like to talk a little bit more about how that franchise model works?
Well, I mean, it's a different business model. Obviously, you had a not-for-profit business model effectively. We were actually members of that school. We were, we were partners for a period of time and were very active in the school. But the franchise model from GreenTag's point of view means that we will have partners in countries that will run the GreenTag system, deal with clients directly, where they sit in their home countries, help them collect the data potentially, do the assessment of the different systems, and recommend those assessments to headquarters. We will do the quality control and ensure that the global system is managed under a single quality certification, because we are externally certified under ISO 9001, and we are verified as compliant too, and starting to go through certification under the Conformance Assessment Standard 17065. So ultimately, the quality control will be held for the certification part of it still within our headquarters, but people will be free to run the model wherever they want. And we see this really, the main benefit of this is that the cost structure of the bulk of the business is going to be based in the currency in the territory at the rates of the local employment, because we want to see this kind of thing be able to roll out in the developing world. And the kind of exchange rates with the Australian dollar and the US dollar for most of those developing countries is, it's terrifying. You see a number that looks totally reasonable to us, and when you see it rolled out in those territories, it's in the millions of whatever the currency might be. And it's like, well, it's not affordable. So in essence, it's a way of trying to have the model be able to be more adaptable, have the business be able to be more adaptable to a widespread market amongst the global economies, developing, developed, or undeveloped. And we see that particularly as applying to Southeast Asia, to India, to China, but also to the UK and Europe and other territories as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that quality control element.
Africa, of course.
Yeah, there are massive opportunities in those jurisdictions, aren't there? We did actually only last week or the week before we recorded a webinar about sustainable procurement in India, because by far the most populous country that accesses our website is India. It dwarfs. If you look at the top 10 countries coming to our site, India is bigger than all of them put together. So that there are massive opportunities out there, and I can understand that need for competitiveness and keeping the quality control, because there's nothing wrong with franchising, is there? I mean, McDonald's have been doing it for decades, Starbucks, even IKEA. We had the sustainability director from IKEA on the podcast recently, and he was describing how the franchise model works there, and I had no idea that it was a franchise, but it actually is. So yeah, that's fantastic. I wish you all success with that. That's amazing. I think so we didn't have a great success with it because we got it wrong from the beginning. And as you say, it's a very different kind of business model, and we haven't attempted to roll out in developing countries as yet. We've done Ireland, we're doing the United States, and we're redoing Australia. But it's an interesting concept to make it affordable for people in developing countries.
Well, we've had a range of experience. Like we've run our own companies in countries like South Africa and still do. South Africa, the USA, Malaysia, we've had wholly owned companies in those areas. We've had licensees, we've had agents. We've tried the different models, and we've had now experience over 15 years understanding the ins and outs of those. And so we think this could actually be a really good and successful model. And the current licensee group that we have are champing at the bit, take up the franchises, because it also means that a bulk of those actually have life cycle analysis and EPD expertise, which means that they can do that kind of work within the system as part of their normal sort of scope of business. But that's the other thing, I suppose, to touch on in terms of the big program issues since we spoke last. Our EPD program became the first Australian full members of the Eco platform, and that's we're rolling out a whole new platform for our EPD program as well as part of that whole process, and offering it as a register to third-party LCA providers and EPD providers to register external EPDs on the website with our panel of reviewers and doing the peer review.
So are you seeing a growth in demand for EPDs?
Oh yes, no question. In fact, one of the biggest concerns I have about the, I'd have to call it the explosive growth that's happening, probably largely pushed by the EPD legislation, within the EU, is, this concept that they're calling bulk EPDs, where all I can hear when I hear the discussions that are going on around that topic is the genericization of LCI data across territories and boundaries, and less experienced people doing the work being, potentially verified by people who are trying to do, 1,000 EPDs at a time. It just really, really concerns me that it feels like it's potentially getting out of control, and we could end up seeing if not a dumbing down, then a drop in the level of accuracy and precision which we expect in EPDs. In fact, need in EPDs for them to be actually useful.
Yeah, there's this whole dilemma, isn't there, between making something affordable and reasonable against the cost, because we've looked at some assurance models and some organisations that do a lot of sort of vendor assurance for big clients. They're looking more and more at sustainability and looking at the school's model for sustainability assessment and assuring it, but they're charging a few £100 to do the assurance, and how much assurance can you do for that price? Very little, in my opinion. So that there's a whole dilemma between affordability, isn't there, and quality.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a much an increasing reliance on AI, and that at the moment, based on my experience, which is not great but not inconsiderable either, because we've been working in the AI field in AI sort of sphere now for about 18 months. It just terrifies me because the language models that they have at the moment, the level of accuracy that in the models I've seen just has me concerned. It really does. But look, then while we're on the topic of LCA and EPDs, the other aspect of this that I am greatly concerned about is the data gap in the life cycle benefit assessment of circular economy and bio-based products. We've been working now with a life cycle benefit methodology developed by the Ever Institute here in Australia. And, for 2 or 3 years now, been putting out EPDs with benefit addendums. But that methodology has been the topic of scientific papers at multiple CTAC conferences and peer-reviewed journals, and the concept isn't seeming to get any traction. And yet there is this yawning gap in the work that the whole of the industry is doing that completely ignores benefit. So if I pose a question to a traditional EPD consultant, can you do me an EPD for a tree? It's one of the most efficient machines we have. They just look at you blank and go, what the hell are you talking about? Well, they know they can't, because what negatives are there coming out of a tree? What impacts are there? Apart from maybe some cracked footpaths from here, And so we're increasingly relying on all these ecosystem services, green buildings, green facades, greening the cities. No one's measuring it. No one's even trying at a scale that will enable widespread take up of, in the way EPDs are being taken up. So how do I identify the avoided resources impact, the avoided pollution, and the avoided impacts on nature of upcycling a piece of furniture, or reusing it, or providing a product as a service using LCA?
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because if you look at, if you imagine a finance director in pretty much any corporation in the world, they kind of get, ESG or whatever it is you want to call it now, but in a financial sense, it's, that there's risk now. There are issues that I need to mitigate. Investors are concerned I might lose my customers, etc. So a lot of the thinking still around sustainability is about risk mitigation rather than consideration of benefits. Because, as you say, how do you do an EPD for a tree? Well, how do you rate the financial benefit of a tree? It's beyond I suppose, the comprehension of the way that we've considered businesses for the last couple of 100 years.
Yeah, and look, it's really more pervasive than even that, because when it really comes down to it, let's call tin tax tin tax. I'm gonna put my black hat on for a second now. As a global society, we cannot any longer afford to reduce impacts while we continue to create them. There's this big talk about climate net zero or carbon net zero. That's one thing. What we have only just recently started to recognize with the Kunming Biodiversity Treaty and all that sort of thing, is that it has to be a nature-generated recovery where carbon is a byproduct, not a primary concern. We've got to flip the narrative round the other way. We've got to, renewable energy is now the cheapest form of energy to buy at a capital level. We should cancel credits. Not necessary. It's the cheapest form of energy on the planet. It's going to happen anyway. What we need to be doing is starting to incentivize nature-based solutions to restoring ecosystems and generating carbon drawdown in the meanwhile. Conventional carbon credits result in net emission gains. They reduce the growth of emissions, not net emissions. If we use nature-based solutions, we are actually reducing net emissions. So that's the theory, that's the concept behind our nature positive certification for products, right? We work with the manufacturers to minimize net emissions, or to minimize emissions, then work to do a distance to zero gap analysis using carbon as a proxy, but then using nature-based solutions, restoring ecosystems to generate carbon drawdown, to take them not just to zero, but into the net positive realm.
That's fantastic. That was going to be my next question, was tell me about nature positive. So thanks very much for that. Could you give us, obviously I completely agree with you and understand and empathise with your angst around this. Could you give us an example? You've kind of talked us through theoretically nature positive, what it is and how it works, but do you have some examples maybe for our listeners to try to get their heads around it? Because this is as you say, it's a really important concept that we need to understand. And I suppose, we need to get the accountants to understand it really quickly. So do you have examples of maybe how it works well and how it doesn't work well?
Well, the first product that we certified as a nature positive product was the Thermal Haven bird and mammal nest boxes. Okay, they were made out of a recycled industrial product that is 97% reconstituted wood, added with a little bit of wax, paraffin wax back, a little bit of extra waterproofing, and then using the natural tannins and lignins to rebind the wood back together. So it was a 100% recycled, or sort of 95% recycled materials, designed like a house with cavity walls and a tropical roof, so that the whole thing ventilated. So you put it out into a fresh forest, and you end up with hollows that are habitable within 1 or 1.5 degrees of a 100-year-old tree in a hollow in a 100-year-old tree. So this has been it's a total breakthrough. Anyway, we worked through the analysis, and without any nature-based inputs, we were able to show that product had 150% nature positive outcomes net after all its impacts were considered. And it allowed habitat to be created and animals to come back into the forest 2 or 3 generations before they would naturally in the normal scheme of things. So that was a really good outcome. Then we were approached by Autex Industries. We just recently finished a product for them called Embrace, which is a stretch wool felt panel for walls, acoustic control, decorative. It's a really interesting product because it's a single source farm that the wool comes from.
David, can I introduce? David, can I interrupt you a bit? David, can I interrupt you because we lost you? Yeah, we lost you for a minute there. So would you like to start again on this other product? We lost a couple of seconds of what you were saying.
Okay.
You don't have to say exactly the same thing again.
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah. You got me back now? Have you got me back now?
We have, yeah. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So yeah, there's this other the second product that we did is called Embrace. It's a stretch wool felt panel from Autex Industries coming out of New Zealand, and it's the wool is sourced from a single farm, grazed regeneratively. We did benchmarking, or the team involved did benchmarking of adjoining farmland versus the soil carbon levels on the farm. The consultant, again, Ever Institute, did this amazing work that identified that protein in the wool and in livestock in general, and even in timber, it seems, is a methane sink. Methane is the building block for the proteins. So put all that in the mix, life cycle benefit analysis, the soil carbon enhancement, that product came out at 160% nature positive in its own right without any further nature-based solution inputs. That product naturally is drawing carbon down from the environment and generating biodiversity beyond its impacts by 160%. So for the first time ever, the industry has a metric that enables it to identify the benefits, quantify the benefits, determine if there's a distance to net zero nature positive, or if the product is in its own right nature positive, and if not, to decide what level of nature-based solution to do the carbon drawdown that it needs to do to get into a nature positive zone. So ultimately, and it's really interesting, because when manufacturers that are in circular economy or bio-based materials, or things like upcycling and furniture as a service, and even big companies like big cement companies that have been doing massive things over the years without really tooting their horn about it, like massive rural holdings where they're restoring whole ecosystems by themselves. There's a huge amount of interest in what the fact that we can now measure what they're doing, and they get the benefit. They'll be able to quantify and use that as part of their sustainability story. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. The two products that you describe are relatively niche in their nature, and how do we get this approach through to mainstream products? But I've been a consultant to a cement-based company for I don't know how long, more than 10 years. And you're absolutely right. They do a lot of fantastic stuff with habitat restoration that they don't really get credit for. I mean, they do it because it's what they do as an organization, but there is up to now, no recognition for that work that's being done. So as I understand it, what you're saying, it's not just about the products and how it's made, where it comes from. It's what it does or what impacts the manufacture of that product has on the externalities. Is that right?
Well, yes, it's looking at all of the benefits that product creates in the context of the operation of the company, and what can be attached to the product which hasn't been able to be attached in the past. And look,
Yeah,
there are
that's quite straightforward, isn't it?
It's really quite interesting. You go to an exhibition and you'll be talking to some quite big companies, and you talk to them about certification, and they're kind of ho hum, you know, move on, next topic, and then you talk about nature positive, and their eyes light up. Like there's a complete change in demeanor because all of a sudden they see something, they see a solution to something that they've identified as a shortcoming themselves, but have never been able to find a solution to. So it's been really fascinating to see the fact that talking about nature positive certification actually brings out people's passions and brings the heart out in the discussion, that is otherwise buried below, the layers of practicality and finances and all that sort of stuff. It's interesting.
It certainly is. It's absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure our listeners are going to be really interested to understand what you're doing and to hear this podcast, because it's so many terms get bandied around, don't they? You know, carbon neutral, net zero, nature positive, all of those things, and people have different interpretations, and some of those expressions are often misused. So it's really good to have an understanding that you've now developed a methodology that can actually measure that and also to verify it.
Yeah, I mean, it's premised on the fact that as a concept, a practice, and indeed an intent, sustainability is dead. It's past its use-by date. It didn't do what we wanted it to do. It got co-opted by the big corporates and turned into greenwash, sometimes at least. But it didn't do what we wanted it to do. It didn't do what we needed it to do. And we are now past a point where we can take that lying down, and we need to be actually making bigger change. And that means we've got to go beyond reducing impacts is enough. It's not. We have to get to a point where even net zero targets for carbon are not enough if they rely on renewable energy offsets. Because we have to get back into nature repair. The biodiversity crisis is already making climate change worse. We are seeing tipping points in the oceans, in the ice caps, where even in ecosystems in a vegetation level, where the Amazon used to be a carbon sink, no longer. It's now a carbon source because of the amount of clearing and burning. So the oceans have been absorbing all this excess heat. Yeah, they've reached their capacity to do that, and now we're seeing massive algal blooms and huge marine heat waves across the whole parts of the globe. But yeah, at different times. But the Mediterranean, 32 degrees C, surface temperature last summer. At the end of summer, like early spring, 98 degrees Fahrenheit in the Gulf of Mexico this week. Surface temperature of the water. How anyway, don't get me started. Anymore, anyway.
This could turn very quickly into a rant. In my head, I'm thinking about titles for this podcast, and just a few minutes ago, I'm thinking, how do you do an EPD for a tree? But now I've got sustainability is dead in my head. But all really, really good points. So thanks very much for that. David, is there anything? I think we've covered a fantastic amount of stuff in a relatively short time. Is there anything else that you'd like to cover, or shall I close now?
Look, I guess I just I did want to cover off just one other thing, and that is I've just had a major birthday. I've had a very touching presentation of well wishes from my staff and a whole lot of my colleagues, culminating the week after I just received the Institute of Architects in Australia National Award for Leadership in Sustainability at the Opera House. So, the work my team does and the work we've been able to achieve together over the last 25 years of a 50-year career has had a really nice culmination, and I'd just like to say thank you to everybody involved, and particularly to the judges.
That's fantastic, and it's high time that you have some recognition for what you're doing, because the world needs more people like you and your team and your colleagues and what you're trying to achieve. So fantastic, congratulations and well done, highly deserved.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and the team has actually just won Australia's Small Business Excellence Awards in Sustainability, and we've just won a big award for the culture of our organisation. So the team itself is also being recognised for what it's done, in addition to any individuals.
That's fantastic because it motivates the team, but it also encourages people to want to come and join you when you're recruiting. I mean, we found my business received a Queen's Award for Innovation in 2022, and it really makes a difference. People stand up and recognise and go, yeah, that's the sort of business that I'd like to be involved in. And, that it seems to me, and I guess it's probably true for you as well, that recruiting quality people in the sustainability space is actually quite hard because there's a lot of competition for them. Big corporates want people, to at least put a fig leaf over what they're doing, if not actually really helping them to more positive solutions. So anything that a small business can do to be attractive to people is really important.
We are very lucky, Sean. Because of who we are a values-led organisation, and we wear our heart on our sleeves, for the planet and for nature. We do get a very high quality of people who approach us. It's a very rare occurrence where we actually even have to put an advert in the paper. We work with a number of universities. We work with interns, and the vast majority of the staff that we have are ex-interns, because we get to know people, they get to know us.
And they decide to play.
We have a big chunk of the team have been with us, 10 years, 15 years, some even more. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, we've got one of our very significant team that was with us for a long time actually left, and he's now coming back. Because they've decided that the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side of the fence. So it's really good to. In fact, two people in recent. One of our team did a big sabbatical in Australia and New Zealand. As it happened, she left and went away for 18 months, and when she came back to Europe, she immediately rejoined. And it's fantastic to welcome those people back because they have the experience and can help us to take things forward.
Yes, indeed, indeed. We have one ex-staff member or current staff member working, doing a master's in Europe while he works for us. So
yeah. Yes, it's there's a clue in the title, isn't there? Global Green Tag, because again with the technology, you can employ people from pretty much all over the world, and our ambition to run a sustainability school in Australia ourselves is, it's not impossible. It's a bit difficult with time zones, but it's not impossible to do these days. It's amazing.
Indeed.
Okay, so David, thanks very much for that. That was a really, really good catch up, and we got lots of sound bites from there. Sustainability is dead. How do you EPD a tree? But I think some really valuable thoughts. I think our listeners will love this because the whole concept of nature-based solutions and how you measure it, how you certify it, and how you kind of think outside the box, I suppose, of products, what they really do and how they're really manufactured and what the positive impacts are, will be a revelation for many of our people. So thank you very much. It's been great to catch up with you, and I'm sure our listeners are going to lap this up.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm much obliged. Cheers.
Okay, David, I think you mentioned in an email that you're going to be away for a while. Is that right? And it's quite soon, as I recall.
I am. I am in London as of June the 5th.
Okay. if it makes sense, because obviously there's always a backlog of these recordings.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.